Hi, welcome to Have You Asked Your Dad, the podcast where we ask dads questions that dads normally don't get asked. In today's episode, we want to know, have you asked your dad about money? That's right, we want to find out what dads think about spending money, saving money, and how they feel about all of that. So let's get straight into that conversation. Here's Have You Asked Your Dad About Money? Hello, Sean Lutz.
Hello, Terence Mentor. You sound like you've been warming up. You sound sing-songy this morning. Have you been singing?
Yeah, I knew we were recording, so I did a bunch of vocal warm-ups beforehand. Taught to me by my friend Candace Preston, who may or may not listen to this, years ago. The one thing I do remember is that you have to warm up your cheeks using tongue twisters like lesser leather never weathers wetter weather better.
That's so good. Lesser leather never weathers wetter. Oh, I need to do some cheek warming, yo. I need to do some cheek warming.
Yes, I can see how your cheeks are getting sore as you're doing that. Okay, but we're not talking about tongue twisters. Although we could do a whole series on how to be a radio presenter and why you shouldn't. But anyway. Speaking of radio presenting, that's how for a long time we both earned money.
Yeah.
In fact, in some ways, you still earn money from me.
This is very true. This is very true. And in some ways, it's some money.
It's some sort of cash into your account. I want to talk about finances today. So the question we're asking is, have you asked your dad about money?
Good question in the sense that no. Straight up no.
I mean, for me, I always saw that like the money stuff was being dealt by my mom mostly.
Okay, yeah.
So she managed the money. She knew what was going where. Both my mom and dad worked, so it wasn't a case of my dad worked and brought a check home and then the housewife dealt with all of the admin. They both worked, but for some reason in my home, the mom did the big money stuff. And now that I'm married, I can tell you that I've changed things around in a big way because I'm kidding. It hasn't changed at all. He still does most of the money management in our home.
Yeah, I think if I were to think back about my dad and my mom and finances, it was never really something that was openly discussed until it got to the point where there wasn't much of it. And then it was quite apparent. Okay, some context. My dad is an entrepreneur and my mom had worked as an agent in sales for many, many years. And so money wasn't really something that they brought to the fore in front of us. And they didn't necessarily say we've got less of it. But as you get older, you start to notice things around you maybe where they used to both drive BMWs. Now they're not. Or they're buying secondhand things as opposed to where they weren't doing that before. But then when it came around to going, hang on a second, so you're struggling a little bit more here and you haven't said anything to us, but I'm not going to go to varsity and I think that's a good idea for all of us here, right? And then you become a little bit more aware of how the finances might be managed or not managed in a household. So in your case, you say your mom did a lot of the management and now Julia's watching over the finances. I make sure that my wife and I both know what's happening in the bank balance. And I almost put her in charge of doing a lot of stuff. Look, she's got the academic brain for it as well. So she loves numbers. She loves the puzzles. It makes sense, right?
Right.
So that to me makes sense. But then I still want to know. I want to know that as my bank account is being used for a lot of the debit orders and it gets depleted pretty quickly.
By the 27th.
I need to know that there is still cash elsewhere. Yeah, exactly. I need to know that there's cash elsewhere still to cover all the things. So ingrained in me then is looking at how the money drops out of my check account, and I then manage my spend very well according to that. And that's a skill I think I learned from my mom, thanks to her shopping around and watching what she was spending.
My problem is that because I have a partner who is quite savvy when it comes to money, but also very conservative in her spending habits, I have leaned on her to help us hold back and to manage the process better. I know that as an adult person, I'd be able to manage my money just fine if I was single. But because I have this person who is so much better at it, kind of like her, so you were saying that your parents didn't really talk about, money or the budget or how things are being spent. Do you find that you struggle to have these conversations with Rue? Because you're saying you quite deliberately make sure that both of you are aware of what's going in and out and where it's being spent. Was that something that was hard to do at first because you didn't see that being modeled?
I find that I have a little anxiety around money, and that sort of irritates her. It rubs her up, right? She doesn't like the fact that I'm constantly going, but are we going to make it? And what are we doing? And shouldn't we rather spend this like that? And she has to constantly placate those feelings and go, Sean, look here, it's fine,
Yes.
Live a little, right? You don't have to, continuously check online to see if you're getting the best deal on something. I'm not saying it's not a bad trait, but I am saying, no, this is Ruenda's voice, which isn't as deep as this, by the way. What I am saying is that, live a little and you can relax, right? So she has to constantly remind me of that. And I feel bad that I bring that upon her, as you say. I'm adding extra stress and strain and worry. I need to come to grips with what my issues are with money, and not continually take those forward. And yes, I guess in the sense where I want her to know and I to know, I mean, I'll probably bring it up over the weekend and go, we should probably check our finances again. Hey, and she'll go, yeah, we probably should.
Right.
And then I probably have to remind her again and go, are we going to check our, are we budgeted? She's like, I did it just the other day. It's fine. And then I need to go, okay, Sean, remember, she knows more. She's smarter. She's savvy. You're savvy.
Yeah.
I trust this person. Don't keep second guessing her, because that's a knock-on emotion, right? Like, I'm scared, and now I'm sort of imprinting that there. I guess that's what I'm afraid of, is imprinting my feelings around money on other people. And I seem to be doing it. Well, she's strong enough not to be imprinted.
She has the mental fortuitude to push back against your assaults.
Oh, yes, she does.
I'm totally in Camp Rue, I would say, because for instance, I don't get buyer's remorse, right? Once the money is spent and we have got the thing that whether if it's a car or a new piece of equipment or the house that we just bought, I am very happy to go, this is where we're at right now. This is what we've done. Even if it's not the best deal, or we discover 2 days later there was a better deal, I'm like, look, we're here now. Let's just enjoy it. Whereas sometimes I think Julie can be paralyzed. And this sounds very similar to you.
Yes.
Paralyzed to even make a purchase because she's so worried about the buyer's remorse later on.
Yes.
That nothing happens now.
Yes.
So we kind of keep circling and circling and circling and circling. And I am not afraid to spend money, which is also not the best thing ever, because you do need to have someone like yourself or like Julie who goes, let's just take half a second to take a step back. And I think I've learned that from her. She's imprinted on me. We've been thinking about installing solar panels in the house. Now, normally what I would do is the first person that walks into the house and says, you should do this, I'd be like, you seem like an expert. Great, let's go with that one.
Okay. Wait, Terrence, what about 3 different quotes? Why haven't you spoken to at least 4 other people yet about what their experience was?
Exactly. You'll be very proud of me. That's exactly what I did. I got quotes. And for each quote, I built a spreadsheet out to compare all the quotes of what we're getting exactly for how much, what the differences are, if there was any kind of feedback or reviews about the particular company. I'd put that in there so that we could have a very clean view of, because look, for this, I understand doing it for this because it's a lot of money. We might have to go into extra debt to do it. So there's big decisions. What I don't understand though is when people like my wife will go, that's a nice dress. I have a clothing budget for that, which means we can afford to buy myself that dress. I'm going to spend 3 months thinking about whether or not to buy the dress. Then the dress will go out of sale and be like, I wish I bought the dress. Now, okay, we are privileged and we are fortunate to be in a space where if you buy a dress for even if it's like 1,000 or 2,000, in the thousands of rands section, if we make a bad purchase in the thousands of rands section, we can recover from that. Okay,
yeah,
it's not going to be. It's going to be 1 month before we're totally fine. Like, let's just calm down. We're not in that space. But because there's a lot of fear around poverty and money and things just disappearing, I also think that because I didn't come from as much of a privileged upbringing as she did. Like, I've seen how you can cope with less. You know, I grew up in the Cape Flats and slightly not Cape Flats, and my life has slowly been kind of like an upward trajectory in wealth. I'm definitely living in a much better space than I ever was when I was growing up. So for me, it's kind of like things work out.
I hear you.
I'm a bit optimistic that way.
You know, I think when we talk about imprinting and so forth, I hear Julie 100%. I mean, I feel in some way we're cut from the same cloth. One that wouldn't have been cut for a very long time until we were absolutely sure that it needed to be cut, and how many strips you could get from said cloth before we cut it. I'm exactly the same. My physiotherapist, who's been working so diligently on my shoulder, first I have to convince myself and reconvince myself that I do need to go to the physiotherapist. And now I put it as a budget line in my budget, and I go, I have to see the physiotherapist, and I'll feel better about spending that money if I know it's already planned for. And I think essentially that's what I want to know. I want to know that the money I've got, I've put a good plan together, and that I'm not going to get to the end of the month and go, my bank account looks really uncomfortable. You know, it looks pretty lonely, those coins that are there on their own. They need some friends, and it's going to be a while till they get some more friends, so I shouldn't spend them.
Do you feel like it might be a case of you're also worried about looking foolish with your money? Like the idea that if you're not the kind of person that gets to the end of the month with a little bit of comfort, that you've been a bit foolish and foolhardy, or is it really about the anxiety of not having enough?
I don't know that it's the foolhardiness. I think it's that I was very aware of what went into the bank account and how nice it looks when there are double digits there compared to how it looks when there are single digits there, right? And when I learned that there is such a thing as compound interest, and I had enough money to put into a money market account, and if I put money into that money market account a couple of months later, it's doubled, that was a nice feeling. And I think it's that thing that I'm constantly chasing. I don't want there to be, obviously I've never gone into the negatives. I'm into my 40s, and it's something I'm very proud of, but it gives me the heebie-jeebies if I can see that number diminishing and I'm getting close to that level, right? Like I don't want for that to happen. And you're quite right. It's not going to happen. And I am very fortunate and privileged, and I'm in a space where I'll be able to bounce back from that pretty quickly. And it was a conversation I've been having recently with some financial management guys around what are the lessons then that we teach young people around their money and how they think about their money. And in my older years, I've tried to think about it as it's a transfer of energy. I don't need to hold on to it. If I keep holding on to it, it's not necessarily passing things along. I don't need to think of it as this particular note. And if I don't have this note in my hand anymore, I'm never going to have another note. It's me simply passing on. It's an energy transfer. You've got it now. I'm going to have it again later. Then I'm going to pass it back again. It's going to make me feel good when I spend it, and it makes you feel good when you receive it. In that sort of way, it's not so much a tangible thing, right? And then we got talking about decisions that we make often. And you and I will make decisions often with regards to going shopping for groceries, or whether or not we're going to go out for coffee this week, or maybe the type of person that drives to work and stops and buys a coffee en route to the office every single day. And you go, hang on a second, if I don't do that every single day, I'm going to save X number of thousand, and over a year, it's going to be 100,000. Cool. And it's an easy decision to make because it's something that you do so regularly. It's the big decisions that I should spend more time on, not the smaller ones. The big decisions of the solar panels, or the new car, or the washing machine, or because I'm not buying those things often enough, I do need to think them through a little bit more. And there, I think that's warranted advice. That's warranted, that's a good way to think about it, because whether there's an interest rate spike that's going to affect your home loan, your bond, that's something worth paying attention to. If you've stumbled across a home that has a really nice big garden and it's in a great area and it's close to good schools and you can afford it today, it sounds cool. But Sean, do you know that you're still going to have enough income to service that bond, look after the garden, stay close to the schools in a year or so's time? There is worth spending your time investigating and thinking. Not about whether or not you're going to get 2 kilograms or 3 kilograms of potatoes when you go to the shop today, you know?
Kind of measuring up this is 110 Rand per kilogram and this is 105 Rand per kilogram. I'm only buying 500 grams. You're not saving that. But,
precisely.
I think it's interesting because my my perspective on even with those big sales is about the total quality of life. And this is where Julie and I have found a way to merge, because having savings improves your quality of life.
Yes.
Because having that level of security helps you stay calm and helps you make decisions later on and potentially do bigger things later on. So it's important to think long-term about your savings. But using the example of the nice house with the garden near schools and maybe near where you work, thinking about, okay, sure, we're spending more on this house, but we're spending less time in the car traveling. Mm-hmm. The kids have more space, will be able to go to and from school much easier, which means their quality of life improves. As a kid who had to travel for like an hour and a half to get to school in the mornings, I know how valuable that is. And it's hard because you can't put a money value on something like that, but it is valuable.
Yes.
So finding ways to go, money is just one way of measuring value. And we have to look at the total value of everything. So for instance, again, with the solar panels, it's not just about how much money we would be saving on electricity every month. It's also for me to have less anxiety around the energy security in our home. So for me, when the power goes out and we don't have lights, a little part of me, as like the person who wants to protect his family, gets a little bit like nervous. Will the power ever come back on? What happens if it doesn't? Having solar panels helps me stay calm.
Yes.
How do you quantify that? Like, how many hundreds of thousands of rands over 10 years is that worth? You can't quantify it. Having a nice garden, if it gives you calmness and solace, sometimes gardens don't. Sometimes gardens make you more frustrated than anything. But using those as an additional calculation into your finances is something that I've been trying to get my family to understand. So using the dress as an example, yes, spending money on the dress is not going to bring any money back. Okay, you can maybe say, I'll use it in a professional setting for professional meetings, but ultimately, it's going to make you feel good. It's going to make you feel confident. I rate Julie feeling confident and happy as worth hundreds of thousands of rands. So the dress doesn't cost that. Fantastic, we're winning. But it's a hard thing to do when we've been told that like the physical representation of things is more important than our own well-being, which I know you like because you are the well-being guru.
I really like your thinking here, Terence, in the sense that to imprint that on your kids is going to do them really well. I think they'll then apply that through all of the things and all the decisions that they make as a way of gauging how valuable this thing is. It's not just the price tag that's attached to that thing. What else does it bring them? How else can it affect their finances? And if it is a big purchase and they go, I'm gonna use this money and it's gonna be gone, then they probably have thought through all of the other value adds that it brings because it's been ingrained and it's imprinted on their way of thinking. I think that's very important in a culture where phrases like YOLO are thrown around all the time. You only live once. It gets reinterpreted as, well, I'm out now. I'm going to buy that bottle of champagne and have a good night because I only live once. So let me splurge. But then you wake up 3 days later and you go, if I didn't spend all that money on a bottle of champagne, I could have done X, Y, and Z. And unless we're grounded in our way of thinking about where we put the value in our entire well-being, as you quite rightly say, then we do make silly decisions that we could wake up regretting a little bit later. So kudos to you. Well done. I think your boys are gonna do very well with their money. Yes.
Thank you. It's taken me over 15 years to figure that out. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Have You Asked Your Dad? We would love to know which questions you think dads should get asked. You can send us your suggestions via email to hyaydpod@gmail.com. That's hyadpod@gmail.com. Or search for Have You Asked Your Dad on Instagram. Send us a message there, and you can also get all the cool behind the scenes stuff right there on our Instagram page. But like I said, thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Cheers for now.